On Halloween morning, 2017, Japanese police made a nightmarish discovery in a small apartment southwest of Tokyo. Inside, they found multiple coolers and storage boxes filled with human remains, including 9 severed heads. The resident of that apartment was a 27-year-old man named Takahiro Shiraishi, who had been luring vulnerable people via Twitter into his home and brutally murdering them. Dubbed the Twitter Killer, Shiraishi preyed on individuals, mostly young women, expressing suicidal thoughts online. Over just a few months, he sexually assaulted and killed 9 people, dismembering their bodies to hide the evidence. Takahiro Shiraishi was born on October 9, 1990, in Tokyo, Japan. By most outward accounts, his childhood was relatively normal. He was described by people who knew him as polite, well-mannered, and helpful. However, even as a child, Shiraishi exhibited a manipulative streak. Family members later recounted that if young Takahiro didn't get his way, for example, if his mother refused to buy him a desired toy, he would stage dramatic outbursts, such as pretending to run away from home to make his parents give in to his demands. These early antics hinted at an ability to emotionally manipulate others, a trait that would take on a far more sinister form in his adult life. As a preteen, Shiraishi also began showing an eerie fascination with asphyxiation. Friends recalled that his favorite game around age 12 was something called the Blackout Challenge, a dangerous activity where participants choke themselves or each other until losing consciousness. He often played this game with a cousin for fun, effectively inducing fainting spells and then excitedly comparing experiences afterward. It goes without saying, this is extremely perilous and not a game anyone should ever attempt. This early dabbling in choking and loss of consciousness was, in hindsight, an ominous foreshadowing of the method he would later use on his victims. In fact, one acquaintance would later confirm that Shiraishi had a history of choking games in school, leaving signs of strangulation on playmates, a chilling precursor to his crimes. Despite these red flags, Shiraishi avoided serious trouble in his youth. After finishing high school, he chose not to pursue higher education. Instead, he drifted through a series of odd jobs. First, he worked in a factory, then as a supermarket cashier, and later held other short-term positions. By his early 20s, however, Shiraishi found a more dubious line of work. He became a scout in Tokyo's red light district, specifically the bustling nightlife area of Kabukicho. His role was essentially to prowl the streets and recruit young women, often vulnerable or naive, to work in hostess clubs and brothels, where they would provide companionship or services. This job was not only exploitative, but also illegal. Unlicensed scouting is against the law in Japan. Shiraishi proved adept at this seedy profession for a time, persuading women with promises of easy money or a better life. However, in early 2017, his luck ran out. He was caught by authorities for his scouting activities and arrested. Shiraishi was reportedly given a suspended sentence of 1 year and 2 months in prison, essentially being put on probation rather than serving full jail time. As part of the fallout, he could no longer continue working in Kabukicho's nightlife industry. This turn of events was devastating for Shiraishi. Disturbingly, he loved the power he had in that job, as it allowed him to take advantage of vulnerable women. Now, at age 27, unemployed and under probation restrictions, Shiraishi felt adrift and resentful. By the summer of 2017, Takahiro Shiraishi sank into a deep depression. He later admitted he felt he had no reason to live if he couldn't return to the life he enjoyed. He desperately wanted an easy way to make money without a regular job. He toyed with various schemes, perhaps starting his own business, or even something illicit, but found the effort involved to be too much work. In his despair, another idea took shape: finding someone rich, preferably a woman, who could support him financially so he wouldn't have to work. This line of thinking led Shiraishi to a new hunting ground for victims, not on the streets this time, but online. Frustrated by real-life constraints, Shiraishi sought solace in the internet, creating a Twitter account in March 2017 to connect with individuals expressing suicidal desires. Targeting vulnerable users in online communities, he adopted the handle @HangingPro, misleadingly presenting himself as a helper who could facilitate their deaths or die alongside them. Prosecutors allege he invited suicidal individuals to his home, nurturing their trust while preying on their despair. One early victim was 21-year-old Mizuki Miura, described as lonely and seeking companionship. Shiraishi befriended her through sympathetic exchanges and deceptive promises, eventually manipulating her into lending him 500,000 yen, approximately 4,500 euros, under the guise of needing funds for independence. Using her money, he relocated to a Zama apartment in Kanagawa Prefecture, insisting on a unit with a loft that would later serve his malevolent intentions, specifically providing a high point to hang a noose. As time passed and Mizuki grew suspicious, demanding repayment, Shiraishi saw her as a liability. In late August 2017, under the pretext of a visit to show her his apartment and settle his debt, he lured her to his home. Polite on the surface, he had carefully planned the encounter. Extensive internet research on murder methods had informed his actions, and he equipped himself with tools necessary for his sinister designs, including a serrated saw, ropes, and a pre-tied noose attached to the loft railing. When Mizuki arrived, Shiraishi waited for an opportune moment to attack. Seizing her from behind, he strangled her without warning, overwhelming her attempts to scream or fight back. Describing the encounter later, Shiraishi admitted that her resistance excited him, escalating his thrill. As she lost consciousness, he proceeded to sexually assault her, which revealed his disturbing preference for non-responsive victims, signifying a twisted aspect of necrophilia in his psyche. Once Mizuki was incapacitated, Shiraishi escalated his horrifying fantasy. He secured the prepared rope around her neck and hoisted her into the air, effectively hanging her from the loft, calmly watching her struggle until she died. In his own words, he found tremendous joy in this moment, deeming it the most beautiful of his life, witnessing her final breaths with fascination as her body convulsed. After Mizuki died, Shiraishi moved her body to the bathroom, where he planned to dismember her, a task he chillingly referred to as disassembling. Equipped with knowledge from various online resources, he began the gruesome process midway through, overwhelmed by the physical exertion and fatigue. Exhausted, he paused, napping in the bathroom for a time he later described as fulfilling, soothed by the sense of conquering his desires. To manage the putrid odor associated with decomposition, Shiraishi intelligently prepared by laying down absorbent materials and using bleach and detergents. He also resorted to boiling some of the flesh with scented bath products in an attempt to mask the horrific smells. Over several days, he fully completed the dismemberment, discarding some parts while deliberately keeping others, particularly Mizuki's severed head and bones, which he stored in coolers intended to evade detection. After dismembering Mizuki, Shiraishi continued to chat online and engage with others, portraying a facade of normalcy while hiding his grisly activities. His meticulous planning extended to covering the scent of decay, but he could not wholly escape the consequences of his actions. Eventually, law enforcement became involved, leading to the discovery of the body parts he failed to adequately dispose of, particularly Mizuki's severed head, buried under cat litter in an icebox. These details of Shiraishi's methodical and grotesque behavior illustrate the shocking reality of his crimes and the depth of his depravity. His actions not only revealed him as a killer, but also as a predator who exploited the vulnerabilities of those seeking help, pushing the boundaries of morality and compassion in pursuit of his horrific fantasies. The case poses broader questions about the implications of seeking connection in digital spaces and the responsibilities of individuals engaging with those in distress. Shiraishi's case thus serves as a grim reminder of the potential dangers lurking in the shadows of the internet, where isolation and exploitation can converge. Between August and October 2017, Takahiro Shiraishi embarked on a serial killing spree that would claim 9 lives in total, including Mizuki. In the span of just about 2.5 months, he managed to lure 8 more victims to his apartment and murder them in similar fashion. Of the 9 known victims, 8 were female and 1 was male, with ages ranging from 15 to 26 years old. Shiraishi specifically targeted young people. In fact, 3 of the girls were still in high school. His modus operandi remained consistent: find vulnerable individuals on Twitter who were voicing suicidal thoughts or emotional pain, then offer them a sympathetic ear and a solution. Posing as someone who also wanted to die, or who could help them die, Shiraishi would patiently groom each target through direct messages. He chose Twitter usernames that hinted at suicide or hanging, making him appear like a kindred spirit to those in despair. Many victims saw him as a friend, or even a savior figure in their darkest moments. According to reports, some of the victims initially believed Shiraishi was going to save them from suicide, that by meeting and talking, he might change their mind. Tragically, a few did reconsider dying once they met him, realizing they actually wanted help to live, not to be killed, but by then it was too late. Once inside his apartment, Shiraishi would not let them leave alive. Each time, Shiraishi prepared his apartment in advance for the kill. He reportedly kept the murder tools and rope at the ready. When a victim arrived, often coming straight from a train station to meet him, he would sometimes even give them alcohol or tranquilizers to relax them. Then, at a chosen moment, he would attack, choking the person until they passed out. He became faster at subduing his victims with practice. After each killing, Shiraishi would once again perform the dismemberment and cleaning process. The first dismemberment, Mizuki's, had taken him 2 days of effort, but with each subsequent victim, he became more efficient, honing his technique and speed. He had all the supplies on hand: the saw, knives, plastic bags, cleaning bleach, and plenty of cat litter for odor control. To understand the human impact of Shiraishi's crimes, here are several examples of the victims and how he drew them into his trap. Kureha, age 15, a cheerful and friendly high school student. One morning in September 2017, she told her mother she was going to school, but instead, she went to meet Shiraishi, with whom she had been communicating on Twitter. When she didn't return home, her mother immediately contacted the police. Unfortunately, like many cases involving missing teenagers, the initial investigation moved slowly. Authorities believe she might have gone away voluntarily. In reality, Kureha had already fallen victim to Shiraishi's actions. Natsumi, age 17, another student who appeared happy on the outside, but was struggling internally. She confided online about feeling hopeless, which drew Shiraishi's attention. In early October 2017, she told her family she was going out with friends, but never came home. Her disappearance followed the same pattern. A report was filed, but the case received little urgency, allowing Shiraishi to continue his crimes unchecked. Aiko, age 23, a young woman whose case would later be key to catching Shiraishi. After the recent loss of her mother, Aiko shared her emotional struggles online. Shiraishi contacted her, pretending to understand her pain. They exchanged messages for several days. In late October 2017, she agreed to meet him, believing they would discuss a suicide pact. Once she realized the danger, she tried to leave. Shiraishi stopped her, and sadly, she became his final victim. Her family's determination to find her ultimately led to his arrest. Male victim, age 20. The only male victim was not suicidal. He was the boyfriend of one of the missing women. Concerned for her safety, he investigated her disappearance and traced her last online contact back to Shiraishi. He confronted him directly, but never returned. His brave attempt to uncover the truth cost him his life, revealing that Shiraishi would harm anyone who threatened to expose him. In total, Shiraishi murdered 9 people, young men and women, each with families, dreams, and lives ahead of them. Between September and October 2017, their families filed multiple missing person reports, but the cases weren't immediately linked. The victims came from different areas, and the patterns went unnoticed. Some families later criticized how slowly the investigations advanced, noting that even when a young mother disappeared, her case wasn't prioritized at first. By the time authorities realized what was happening, Shiraishi had already claimed 9 innocent lives, operating for weeks undetected, hidden in plain sight. By the end of October 2017, Takahiro Shiraishi had taken the lives of 8 women and 1 man. The disappearance of his 9th victim, Aiko Tamura, finally set in motion the chain of events that would bring his crimes to light. Aiko's older brother, referred to in some reports as Naru, grew deeply concerned when she vanished on October 23, 2017. They had always been close, especially after the recent passing of their mother, and he knew immediately that she would never disappear without a word. When initial police efforts failed to produce results, Naru decided to act on his own. He searched through Aiko's social media accounts and quickly found her final online activity. Her last public post read, "I want to disappear from this world. If someone wants to disappear with me, please message me." Soon below it appeared a reply from a user named Hanging Pro, the alias used by Shiraishi, saying, "We can do it together." Reading this, Naru immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. Determined to uncover the truth, Naru pushed the police to trace the account. At the same time, he created a plan with the help of a trusted friend. The friend, using a false Twitter profile and the alias Yumi, pretended to be someone struggling with depression. She reached out to Shiraishi's account, claiming she wanted to end her life. As expected, Shiraishi responded quickly and arranged to meet her at a nearby train station, unaware that this was a carefully planned setup. Naru coordinated with investigators from the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. Their plan was simple: to follow the decoy victim and locate Shiraishi's residence. On October 31, 2017, as Shiraishi moved to meet Yumi, detectives arrived at his apartment in Zama with enough evidence to confront him. When Shiraishi returned to his building, expecting to bring the woman there, he was met by the police at his doorstep. An officer asked him directly, "Where is Aiko? We know she's here." Realizing the truth could no longer be hidden, Shiraishi calmly pointed toward the inside of his apartment and replied, "She's in there." It was an unspoken confession, the moment everything came crashing down. As officers entered, they were struck by the strong odor inside the small apartment and immediately called for backup. What they found confirmed their worst fears and ended one of Japan's most shocking investigations in recent history. As investigators searched Shiraishi's apartment, the full scale of his crimes finally came to light. The small room, barely large enough to fit a bed, a desk, and a few boxes, was packed with containers. There were 10 in total, mostly large coolers and storage bins. 9 of them held physical evidence from the victims, and one, chillingly, appeared to be prepared for someone else. Inside these containers, detectives found what they later described as the evidence of 9 missing persons. Each box revealed traces of human remains, bones, fragments, and other material carefully stored away. In total, investigators documented the remains of 9 individuals, alongside various personal items belonging to them. Among these belongings were identification cards, handbags, pieces of clothing, and other objects that helped confirm each victim's identity. The findings left no doubt. The people who had vanished over the previous months had all been inside this apartment. Scattered throughout the room were also several tools, items later confirmed to have been used in connection with the crimes. Every object was carefully photographed, cataloged, and sent for forensic analysis. DNA testing would later match each sample to one of the 9 missing victims. Even as the officers processed the shocking discovery, Shiraishi appeared disturbingly calm. Witnesses described him as quiet and detached, almost indifferent to the chaos unfolding around him. When confronted, he reportedly told officers, "You've come to the right place." He made no attempt to deny what he had done and offered no resistance as he was taken into custody. The scene was unlike anything the police in Zama had ever encountered. A grim, unforgettable discovery that marked the end of one of Japan's most haunting investigations. Once in custody, Takahiro Shiraishi began to confess with surprising honesty. During questioning, he calmly admitted what he had done and explained that he had tried to cover his tracks afterward. There was little need for a lengthy investigation. The physical evidence was overwhelming, and Shiraishi's own statements filled in the missing details. Still, the case would take time to reach trial. In Japan, criminal proceedings can move slowly, especially in complex cases involving multiple victims. Meanwhile, Shiraishi's lawyers began working on a defense strategy that would soon draw national outrage. When the trial finally began in late September 2020, nearly 3 years after his arrest, it captured massive public attention. Here stood a 29-year-old man charged with multiple counts of murder, robbery, and other crimes, accused of targeting vulnerable people through social media. The courtroom became the stage for not just a criminal trial, but also a broader conversation about the dangers of the internet and mental health in modern Japan. Throughout the proceedings, Shiraishi showed almost no emotion. Observers noted how he often appeared detached, yawning, doodling, and showing little interest in the process unfolding around him. His indifference was deeply painful for the families of the victims who sat only a few meters away. Then came the shocking defense argument. His attorneys claimed that many of Shiraishi's victims had agreed to die, suggesting he was merely helping them fulfill their suicidal intentions. They argued this should reduce his responsibility, an attempt to downgrade the charges. But the court, prosecutors, and the public quickly rejected that idea. Not only was at least one of the victims not suicidal, but several had clearly resisted once they realized his intentions. And under Japanese law, a person cannot legally consent to be killed. It remains murder. Even more striking was that Shiraishi himself didn't support this defense. He told his lawyers not to fight for him and refused to plead insanity or innocence. He admitted that everything he did was intentional and said he was ready to accept the punishment, even if that meant death. At one point, he stated simply, "I did it because I wanted to," showing complete acceptance of his fate. His attorneys tried one last argument, blaming society. They claimed that if Shiraishi hadn't lost his job in Tokyo's entertainment district, he might never have turned violent. This reasoning was met with disbelief and anger from the public, who viewed it as an attempt to shift blame away from the real cause, Shiraishi himself. During the trial, the stories of each victim were recounted in court. Families listened in tears as they heard what had happened to their loved ones. Shiraishi expressed no genuine remorse. He admitted that the only regret he felt was for his final victim, Aiko, but only because her disappearance led to his arrest. His words reinforced the coldness that defined his character throughout the trial. On December 15, 2020, the Tokyo District Court delivered its verdict. Takahiro Shiraishi was found guilty on all counts, 9 murders, along with related charges of theft and concealment of evidence. The court ruled that the only appropriate punishment under Japanese law was death. When the sentence was announced, Shiraishi remained calm. Reports say he even nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the decision. True to his word, he filed no appeals, making his death sentence final. Under Japan's system, the date of execution is never disclosed to the inmate or the public. Those sentenced to death wake up each morning not knowing if it will be their last. This secrecy is meant to reduce anxiety, but often has the opposite effect, leaving prisoners in a state of constant uncertainty. Some observers noted the irony. Shiraishi had used the online name Hanging Pro, a chilling reference to his crimes. In the end, that same method would become the way justice was carried out, a dark symmetry that many found both haunting and symbolic. In the aftermath of the case, the Japanese government and law enforcement took decisive action. Authorities began monitoring online spaces more closely, especially forums and hashtags where people expressed thoughts of self-harm. The goal was prevention, to identify those in distress early and connect them with mental health professionals before someone dangerous could exploit their vulnerability. The case also revealed serious gaps in how missing persons, particularly young adults, were being handled. Public criticism pushed the police to reform their procedures, urging officers not to dismiss missing youth reports so quickly as mere runaways. For the victims' families, life after the trial was filled with grief and anger. They endured painful testimonies and watched as the man responsible for their loved ones' deaths showed little emotion in court. Some expressed relief when the death sentence was announced, but also frustration that Shiraishi never apologized or showed remorse. Their loss was unimaginable, and many continued to struggle long after the case closed. As for Shiraishi himself, after 2020, he remained on death row at the Tokyo detention house. Even there, he continued to seek attention. In 2021, he cooperated with a journalist writing a book about the case, but only on the condition that he be paid, asking for money to buy small comforts in prison. Incredibly, he also asked the author to include a note that he was looking for a wife. It wasn't about love. In Japan, only family members can visit death row inmates, and his own family had cut all ties with him. His end eventually came. On July 26, 2025, Takahiro Shiraishi was executed at the Tokyo detention house. As is customary in Japan, he received no prior warning. At 34 years old, the man who once called himself Hanging Pro met his fate in a final act that many viewed as poetic justice. Takahiro Shiraishi's case remains one of the darkest chapters in modern Japanese history, a chilling example of how social media can become a weapon in the wrong hands. It forced Japan and the world to confront how easily online platforms can be manipulated to target the vulnerable. And it reminded us all of something deeper, that empathy and intervention can save lives long before tragedy strikes. Because behind every desperate message online, there is a person who simply needs to be heard. Yet, this is not fiction. It happened in 2017 in a quiet Japanese neighborhood, and it reminds us that real life can produce horrors to rival any crime thriller. The legacy of this case is twofold. On one hand, it brought about positive changes, improved awareness of mental health issues, strengthened online safeguards, and a renewed call for vigilance in both law enforcement and communities when someone goes missing. On the other hand, it remains a story of profound loss. 9 innocent lives ended in brutality, families left to mourn, and a nation forced to ask how someone among them could commit such deeds.